Alejandro, and Juan, as Jose Emilio said, and we are going to introduce you to architecture decision records. These are the topics that we are about to discuss. And the first is, what is an architecture decision record? As you can see in the slides, it is a document that captures a decision, but it also includes the context of how this decision was made, how did we reach the decision, and the possible consequences of adopting the decision. As a consequence, at the end, we will have a list of those decisions that are significant. I mean, those that affect the structure, dependencies, interfaces, etc. Developers and stakeholders are also able to see IDRs. To sum up, everyone will be able to see these records to avoid misunderstandings when trying to understand the motivation for a determined record. It helps to discover the motivation behind certain decisions too, as we will keep track of those topics needed in order to achieve that decision. And it also has a lot of benefits that will be seen in the next slide. Obviously, there are more than 3, but for me, these are the main benefits of using this. The first is that they are especially useful for capturing long-term intentions, as all the team will be able to see at every time what the key challenges are and the evolution of our architecture. And we can also document rejected solutions and explain why they couldn't be beneficial for achieving our goals. The second is that they are small and modular, which makes the maintenance of a system easier. In fact, they could also be called lightweight architecture decision records. The main reason is that we try to isolate questions into small pieces, something like what we have done in another course of our degree called IPS, and well, like dividing the epics into user stories, or well, in what is done in an agile methodology. And the last but not least is that they are records for significant questions, and then the quantity of valueless information will be minimum. What do we want to say with this? In these records, we will only cover the aspects that really matter when we are declaring one record, for instance, the context and the scope, forgetting about every unessential point and providing a great approach for knowledge sharing and transparency. This, I have to remark, was one of the questions of our partners. I think that it was a question of Héctor Fernández Maillo. And well, we have a precious schema on the left that explains every situation in which we should write an IDR. But I will introduce the most important, at least for me. And the first is that every time we make an architecturally significant decision, we should write an IDR. When we start planning how to develop a project, we will always have to make decisions that have a large impact on all the topics that an IDR covers. For instance, at a certain point of development, we introduce a new API or a library or some mechanism that involves important changes, and then an IDR is needed. The second is when the solution of a problem is not documented yet, and saving the solution for a problem could save our life many times, as we don't know when a problem could appear, and keeping track of how to solve a question is always worthwhile. And the last is when we have a problem and a solution involves changes or not. Even though a lot of questions that have no impact could remain undocumented, an accumulation of insignificant referring to the architectural aspect, of insignificant decisions could make a mountain out of a molehill, and that will be very complex to solve in the future. And now, Juan will keep talking about this.
Okay, so as Alberto said before, we should create an IDR every time we make an architecturally significant decision. Then we should keep a collection of records for architecturally significant decision. But what is a significant decision? What are considered that? There are those that affect the structure, non-functional characteristics, dependencies, interfaces, or construction techniques. Reusing again Alberto's words, an IDR is a short text file, so we could use and should use a lightweight text formatting such as Markdown here or TextStyle. There are several examples. IDRs will be numbered sequentially, and numbers will be not reused. It is very important to keep an old ADR if a decision is reversed, and change the status. We will talk about it later, but it is important because it is relevant still. It is still relevant to know that it was a decision, but is no longer a decision. So we should keep all the ADRs even if the decision is changed. Now we are going to see the templates in order to create an ADR, but we will see the components later. And the size should be more or less about 1 or 2 pages in order to be an easy and fast document to digest. We will write each ADR as if it was a conversation with a future developer. So we should apply a good writing style with full sentences organized into paragraphs. We should write it as a conversation because, as we will see later in a question, this is for the future developers that are assigned in the project in order to make their life easier. So now we are seeing the components of an IDR according to Michael Nigard. There are a lot of templates in order to create an IDR, but we decided to choose this one because it is simple and brief. We only have a few parts, so each document is really easy to understand. The first component is the title, which is a simple title with a short noun phrase. The second one is the context. It is a really important part of an IDR, and this section describes the forces at play, including technological, political, social, or project local. And these forces are probably in tension and should be called out as such. The language in this section is value neutral. It's simply describing the facts. Decision. This section describes our response to these forces, the chosen option. Let's say the solution to the problem. The status, as we said before, it specifies the state of the decision. It can be proposed when we propose an ADR to the stakeholders, but they didn't have agreed with it yet. It can be the status as accepted or rejected, depending on the decision of the stakeholders after seeing the ADR. It can be accepted if they agreed and rejected if they didn't. And it can be superseded. As we said before, when we have an old ADR which is changed the decision, we mark it as superseded in order to say that this ADR was changed by another ADR because of a change in the decision. And now to understand this better, I'm going to explain a concrete example of daily life. It's not related with software, but in order to understand the concept better. Let's suppose that we are constructing a building and we identify a problem, and we have to allow natural light into the building. After thinking, we notice a possible solution, obvious, make an opening in the wall. Now, the context is important because we may be building a mud hut or a huge skyscraper. So in each case, the decision to take is really different. Those cases will determine two different patterns, which are the pattern one, the context is different because it is a mud hut, than the second pattern because it is a skyscraper. But we can see here that the problem and the solution are the same in both patterns. So what is the difference? The difference is when this will be the context and the problem would be the solution would be, as we said before in this slide, the decision. So we have here those. But then when we arrive to the conclusions, the consequences, we realize that there is another consequence, which is prevent wind from entering. And now, depending on the context, that's why I said it was important before, we get another two patterns, which are the pattern 3, which context is the pattern 1 related to the mud hut, and the pattern 4, which is its context is the pattern 2 related to the skyscraper. Now we can see that the problem is the same, prevent wind from entering, but the solution changes depending on the context. That's more or less the idea of the ADR. The consequences are really determined by the context of the problem. And now I left Alejandro with the rest of the presentation.
So where should the ADRs be stored? They're part of the project documentation, so they can be stored in the same directories as the rest of the documentation. And as they are just text files, sorry, we can also keep them in a version control system like Git, along with the project source code. This way we can follow the same workflow as with the rest of the project, like version history, pull requests, issues, etc. Additionally, they will be synchronized with the rest of the project, and the commit history can provide us an overview of the context in which the ADR was made. Now, I will talk about which tools are available to deal with ADRs. Due to their simple text file nature, you can just use any text editor by creating the files and editing them. But this can be tiring, so there exist programs to automate tasks like creating ADRs following a template, updating their status, superseding previous decisions, linking the ADRs, or generating a table of contents. One such program is ADR Tools that follows Michael Nigar's proposed format, which we explained in a previous slide. As the ADR format is not a fixed standard, there exist different templates apart from the Nigar's one, like Markdown ADR, which specifically uses Markdown as the syntax, or one for business cases, which includes cost analysis in the for each option. Now we will answer the questions posed in the forum. First, what are the major and practical benefits of ADR? As we already told, they provide us a historical log with all the major architectural decisions regarding the project. So the reasoning and context do not get lost as the project grows or team members change. Also, as all the stakeholders are part of the decision process, there is more discussion and ideas to try to find the best approach than if it was just a single member of the team deciding. How can we know that the decisions we made are correct before knowing the results in the near future? During the decision process, the stakeholders try to come around with the best option based on the context known at the moment. We cannot always be certain that this will be the best decision as the project evolves and the context changes. So if we see that this is no longer valid, we should create another ADR and propose a different decision. When should the architecture decisions be made? What are the consequences of failing in choosing the right time? The decisions should be made whenever a significant impact is a decision with a significant impact is needed. But we already explained this in one of the slides, so we have to ask ourselves whether we have a problem. Is there an existing solution? Is it documented? So we need to write an ADR. And the consequences of failing in choosing the right time are usually a loss of time, both if the decision is made early, because we must know the details of the problem, and they can change, and we have to detail them as much as possible. And later, because the problem can be much larger if we don't make the architectural decision in time. Now one of my partners will continue.
Yes, another question was, why is it important to use standardized decision documentation, and what are some of the other formats besides ADR? Okay, it is really important to use a standardized decision documentation because, as I said before, if a new partner joins the project we are working at, it is really important for them to understand what were the past problems and what are the current and future problems. And some other formats besides ADRs, the example, for example, the example I explained before was an example of an Alexandre pattern, which is a pattern which consists of context, problem, and solution, where a pattern can be the context of another pattern to describe more complex problems. And as I explained before, this was really related with IDRs because they follow a very similar structure, but they have also the consequences which I adapted to the explanation. The next one is what are the sections we need to include in an ADR? Okay, so the first section is the decision identification. We can ask ourselves how urgent and how important is the architectural decision. The second one is decision making. There are a lot of decision making techniques, from general one to architect specific ones, such as, for example, dialogue mapping. The third one is the decision enactment and enforcement, which as IDs are used in software design, they have to be communicated to the stakeholders and of the system that fund, develop, and operate it. And obviously, they have to accept them. Then there's an optional step, which is decision sharing, in which many architectural decisions recur across projects, across different projects. So experience with path decision, good or bad experiences, can be valuable in reusable assets. Not the last one, but also almost, sorry, the decision documentation. There are many templates, and it was what we explained before. And the last one now is the decision guidance. A lot of decision making techniques exist, both general ones and software architecture specific ones. So the next question, we have already explained it in the presentation, which is what are the sections? Sorry, is there any relationship between ADR and lean software development? This one, the lean development can be summarized by 7 principles, which are eliminate waste, amplifying learning, decide as late as possible, deliver as fast as possible, empower the team, build integrity and optimize the whole, and that's all. And as we explained before, this principle fit very well with the process to decide and writing an ADR. For example, eliminate waste can be compared with the short description nature of the ADRs, or decide as late as possible can be related with making the decision on time with ADRs. So now, is it useful to document decisions, solutions, even if they were rejected? Yes, of course it is useful. I explained it before, but I repeat it. If the project comes around the same or similar issue again, it is really useful to know why a solution was rejected, so we can choose and reconsider it in case the context no longer applies or not. And there are 2 more questions which were made today